Hello guys, so it's in the middle of the night and I wanted to review this AMD Ryzen 3 4400. You probably can't stand me at the moment because of my accent, but I'm also like sick at the moment. But yeah, I bought this processor here because I was just really interested in testing the performance, since we have not seen a really cheap Ryzen processor or an AMD processor in general for a long time now. So for around $100, I think this was an interesting product. If I'm not able to game with it, I'm gonna put it in like a mining rig or something like that. I'm not sure. This is like a Send to product, so I'm not really expecting too good of a performance, but I'm hoping for a performance that is comparable to my 10100, which is like the same performance as a 10100F and 10105, which is in the same price point. But I don't expect performance to compare at least to the new 12100. But even keeping up to a 10 series Intel i3, I'm sure gonna be a hard task, because this is not a really good single thread or core performance because of the Zen 2. But yeah, let's check out the actual performance. So we will compare the processors against each other in a few different games. I've set them up all to be like processor bottlenecked, turning down the resolution to 1080p and also not having a very high in-game quality. And we can see that on the GPU usage up in the left corner, it's never up to 100%, so we are always bottlenecked by the CPU. So the CPU is always limiting how many frames we actually see on the screen. In CSGO, we can see that we get an average of 224 frames and a 1% low of 71, 72. And I would say this is more than good enough for me for an enjoyable experience. But compared to other systems and processors, this is fairly low for an old game like this. So with the 4100, we see we got an average of 224. And with the 10100 we get an average of 275, which is a 22% increase. But I would say that both of these processors here have no issue playing this game here for an enjoyable experience, but it's just a good game to test these kinds of performance. Going over to Call of Duty Vanguard, we can see that the 4100 is now struggling a lot. We get an average of 86 or so, which is good enough, but when we see like the 1% lows, which are fairly common, down to like 30-40 frames, I wouldn't really say this is a good experience. So personally, I couldn't really play like this for a long time. And with the i3 10100 we have no issues at all. We can see that we get a really nice 142 average, which makes for a really enjoyable experience, and the 1% low is fairly high as well at around 85 frames. And in a game like this here we can really see the difference. The i3 makes for a really nice enjoyable experience with high FPS numbers, but I would almost say on the 4100 it's not playable. In Call of Duty Warzone, the average and the 1% low doesn't really seem as bad, but I just feel whenever I'm like turning around or in a gunfight or so, it like dips down to like 50, so it feels very unstable, maybe going from 120 to like 50-60 in the next second. So for me it's not an enjoyable experience, and I can really see it impacting my performance in game, making me a worse player and also making for a much worse experience. So looking at the numbers, yeah, it's okay, but for me personally it's not really enjoyable and playable. And this goes for most Zen 2 processors in this game here as well. If you want a good smooth experience in Warzone, you would at least need a Zen 3 in my opinion, or a i3 10th gen or better. with the i3 10th gen we have no issues at all, and this is even comparable to the Century processors when it comes to performance in Call of Duty Warzone. Overall, gives a very nice experience, and we see a 40% increase in the average and 20% increase when it comes to the 1% lows. So it's nice to see that AMD now have released some cheaper processors that are in stock and you can actually buy. But this here is still a Zen 2 product, so when it comes to gaming for performance, we are very limited, and it's not like they have done some magical thing with this processor here. We are still on the Zen 2 architecture, so we are still like getting the same kind of performance as we saw with like a 3600 or so. So this is nothing I could recommend for a cheap gaming rig or so. If you go for an i3 10th gen and newer, and they are like in the same price bracket, they just makes more sense for gaming at least.